Hello, football family. Welcome into Huddle It Up Films. I have Cole Jackson back with me. We're going to talk about the new veteran addition to our offensive line and Alejandro Villanueva. Cole, of course, offensive line expert, kind of explained that in the last video. But if you would, Cole, can you just give us can you introduce yourself to everybody, please?
Absolutely. So Cole Jackson from Two Guys Watching Football. Me and my partner Michael Crawford just launched a new series really dedicated to learning more about the Ravens, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's just two guys watching football, trying to bring on different guests, and you'll see episodes where it's me with someone, me with Mike, or Mike with someone, and that's kind of the whole point. It doesn't matter who the two guys are; it just needs to be two guys. So be sure to check it out if you like it. Subscribe so you kind of see videos drop and find your way back. But my background, I played offensive line growing up, became an offensive line coach with a AAA program up here in Canada, and just kind of fell in love with it. Now I'm just kind of running with it. It's kind of married well with my love for the Baltimore Ravens, and the two are going together. And I've just been diving into. Greg Roman's been so fun for me. I know he takes a lot of hate, but he's such a beautiful run game designer. So it's been a blast from an offensive line perspective.
Yeah, historical. And hey, I want one more question I forgot to ask you last time. Why the Ravens? How the Ravens?
So it's a weird story because my dad was a Steelers fan growing up, and
That'll do it. That'll do it.
it was weird, man. But it was really just Sundays sitting down watching that. Like I was born in '92, so I was like only 7 when the Ravens won the first, or 8, I guess, when the Ravens won the first title. So I don't really remember a whole lot of it, but I really just fell in love with Ray Lewis, and I just kind of kept following him. And my dad wasn't kind of a dick about it being the Steelers' arch rival, and it just kind of took off, man. And then I just followed them ever since. But it's kind of cliche, but it really was all just loving the way Ray Lewis played the game.
It's funny, Cole, because we're stray off topic just for a little bit, but I have fans that have contacted me from Brazil, other countries, and when I ask them the same thing, it's usually Ray Lewis, Ed Reed. I love
Yeah.
the style. That's why. But let's jump into Alejandro. Let's talk about his run blocking. It's obviously going to be different assignments than he was asked to do at Pittsburgh.
Yeah, no. So the biggest thing that we're going to see with Villanueva is a completely different scheme, at least based on what the Ravens have been running. I mean, the biggest thing for me is I could really see with some of these new offensive line additions, Bozeman sliding over, the possibility of a Ben Cleveland starting at left guard, Villanueva now at right tackle. I think there's a real opportunity to run some more inside zone. It's something that even in 2019, where we did more of it, we didn't do a lot of it still. It was still predominantly a gap or a veer scheme. And so I think that could be something. And the reason I'm saying that and it's so relevant for Villanueva is because that's pretty much, inside outside zone was pretty much all the Steelers did. I was able to find some clips of him doing some down blocks in gap concepts. And, Villanueva's taken a lot of hate for his run blocking. A lot of their fans say he's not good at it. I don't think it's his strength. I don't think he's necessarily bad at it. He's big, he's mobile, and I think that will help him with those down blocks because he's so big that he just gets his hands on you and he can just run you out of the play. It's kind of the nice thing about down blocking from that right tackle spot is you just got to get your hands and get movement on a guy. You don't necessarily have to get out and get in the fray of things. So I think he'll do a little bit less of those zone concepts and, being in a bit of a more box where he's just got to drive block a guy down the line, I think it might actually help him out. I think one of the big things that we've seen over the years, because, he's getting up there in age, he's 33, 34 now. With any guy, he just gets less mobile and that can be tougher in any run blocking. But I think in the Ravens scheme where he might see more down blocks or he might see more inside zone as opposed to outside zone, because I really think they have the potential to run it, even though they haven't historically done it under Roman. I think it could really put him in a position to succeed. So I think he could be in a really good spot to take a step forward. But and the other thing I want to mention, even though it's, we could talk about this in the past pro section, but he's so good on screens because he's so athletic. And so that is something, and it's, we talked about this with Bradley Bozeman. It's not necessarily just getting out there fast. It's getting out there, IDing the play, IDing the assignment. And that's something he does well. So was him besides Zeitler, another vet, I think they could maybe get to a point where they could actually successfully run a scheme or a screen for the first time in like 85 years. So, that's something I want to throw out there because I think it's super relevant.
Yeah, we gave up on the screen pass. I remember my notes. I think it was in the Indianapolis game where I said we are terrible at screen passes. It was just offensive line timing. It was everything. And from that point on, I don't really think we ran one outside of a 2 minute drill type situation like in
Yeah.
a regular flow of our offense. But yeah, it's funny. Like I take all these detailed notes, and then at the Indianapolis game, I got so fed up. I'm like, we can't run a screen pass for the life of us. But the one thing that I was really impressed with when I started watching Villanueva is just how easy he moves at his age. It's you mentioned it; it stands out to me, and I think that he'll be better from the blocking schemes that you're talking about. Just to, in layman's terms, he'll be asked to move forward a lot more instead of moving sideways and kind of
Yeah.
trying to be nimble-footed. But this man is quick, and like Bozeman, he's under control in space. He IDs everything fast. He can see. He's got a good field vision. And man, that would be nice because I haven't heard somebody say that before. But if we can, we did hear that we're trying to throw to the backs more. Maybe Villanueva is going to be a big piece of that. So in the past game, I wanted to ask you specifically. I mentioned his quickness. These jump sets that he does, man, out of his stance and getting on the defensive ends quickly, blew my mind. I'm like 33, 34 years old, but people talk about how big of a loss Orlando Brown is, and of course Orlando's got plenty of game, but Villanueva is a different style. How do you see him fitting in our pass backman?
It's a completely different style. And I think you saw, if you go back and you watch his 2020 versus 2019 film, and we're kind of lucky because we watch so much Steelers because they're, a big rival, a big playoff contender. So I personally watch more of them, and I'm sure you do as well. So, he had the quickness to use jump sets effectively, but I think the very fact that the Steelers could not run the football last year, he had to, out of necessity, mix up his set type just to kind of do something to keep the defenses, off their game. Because, and
Okay.
I argued with this with guys from the Steelers beat so many times. If I'm a defensive line coach, defensive coordinator, and they can't run the damn ball, what do you think I'm telling my edges to do? It's put your hand in the dirt, keep your eye on the ball, and as soon as it's snapped, you bend that edge. And so that is a hell of a day for any offensive tackle. And that's kind of the very nature of why we get the Ravens scheme as offensive line friendly. It's the threat of Lamar. It's the threat of the run game that kind of, forces natural hesitation on a defensive line. That gives them the split second that it can give an advantage to the offensive line from the snap to contact point. So, that I wanted to factor in, but it's, I think you saw so many different types of sets from Villanueva out of necessity to try and do something different to help him out schematically, to try and give him an advantage, because his play calling was not giving him an advantage. So I think that's really relevant because we got to see a big sample of him doing different sets, and you're bang on. Like, his jump sets are freakish. And with his size and his length, like, if he can get, it's kind of the same concept that we talked about with Bradley Bozeman. If he can get out to you and limit the amount of space that you have to operate in, he can just dominate in that box, right? So it's the same concept. So even though he's at tackle, he jump sets out there, that lowers that box. It gives the defensive end less time to kind of play around with,
Yeah,
less space.
they don't even have time to get going. I mean, it's he's on them that quick, and maybe I'll link some video up here because I do have a Justin Houston video, where he was facing Villanueva, and Villanueva handled him. Cole, like I figured I could watch both of them at the same time. Villanueva held his own when Justin Houston was on his side. But yeah, jump sets, just for anybody who doesn't know, basic way to explain it. You just jump out of your stance. It's not kickback steps. You just jump out and get on your guy. And man, Villanueva is really, really quick with that. So yeah, the back and forth with the Steelers beat writers though, they're saying, well, his pass blocking was easy because the Steelers were getting the ball out in 2 or 3 seconds. But the reason that they were getting the ball out in 3 or 3 seconds is because they couldn't run the ball, and basically defensive ends and everybody was just coming right after the quarterback.
And I got to jump in there because
Go
any
ahead.
coach, any offensive line coach that's assessing their players, they don't give a crap what the result of the play is. So if the ball's out, they're looking at their guy in a vacuum because that's how you assess the way a guy's using his technique. So it doesn't matter that the guy bent and got to the quarterback, but the ball was already gone. So it's not a negative pass rush event. That doesn't make the offensive tackle's job easier. It makes his job a nightmare when you cannot do anything to throw off the defensive line. Like it's one of those things where I read and, I see some of the big guns like Brandon Thorne, Duke Mayweather that, kind of stop arguing with people because they're like, you just don't understand offensive line play. And it's one of those things where, maybe you just have to put yourself in the shoes, but that's not how players are assessed. They're assessed on their sets individually.
Yeah, I mean, he knows what he has to do on each given play and what the play call is. So, he knows what he has to do basically to make it a successful play. And Cole, I tell you, coming out on Twitter and everything last year, I noticed that just because somebody says, like I always tell people who are fans of mine or interact with me or just friends of mine, just because somebody tells you that they watch film doesn't mean they really know what they're talking about. Like I say that with all due respect, but like it's like statistics. You can read them one way or the other. You have to put everything in context. So I wanted to ask you, how do you think Villanueva has Zeitler right next to him? What do you think from just how will they work together? How will his transition go from learning a whole new position this late in his career?
It's a good question, and it's the best way I've explained it to people when they're like, "Well, how can you? It mustn't be that hard to switch sides. Like, you just kind of reverse your footwork." And I always say, "Well, go wipe your ass with your other hand," and so see how that goes. But it is one of those things where there's of course an adjustment period. Like there's no doubt that there's an adjustment period. But in terms of some of the things that are harder to pick up at a new position, and that's you mentioned it, like his field vision, his mental processing, that's not going to be what is the struggle. Like he's not, suddenly in a completely different position where you might kind of move from inside to outside and then everything's a little bit different. The assignments are a little bit different. It's a lot more technique based. It's getting comfortable in your stance. It's kicking in that stance. It's a lot of the things that actually Orlando Brown Jr. talked about. I think a lot of people didn't quite notice it because they were so upset with the situation. And I know I was like, it was a frustrating situation. But he talked about it. He's like, it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel natural. But we were able to see Orlando Brown, get used to it pretty darn quick, where that wasn't what ever caused him problems. And so when we look at it like that, when we consider Zeitler being there right beside him, he's played the game. His biggest upside as a guard is his mental processing, his ability to kind of coach his teammates, ID plays. And then when you consider Bozeman's now there at center, who's got, 2 years full-time starting experience in this offense, it kind of creates a nice little comfortable right side from center to right tackle. So, it's going to take him some technique adjustment, but he did it all through the OTAs. I think the Ravens were really smart by not having him fill in at left tackle for Ronnie Stanley. They just put him right over to the right side, just stick there, sit at right tackle, get used to it. I think the Ravens are handling it really well. And it's similar to the Bozeman situation. There's not really a piece of evidence where I have concern right now. Of course, that'll adjust as we see preseason games. We get reports out of training camp. But right now, it's all signs are looking good.
I'm optimistic because you're talking about veterans here, and the time that it takes to gel together should be lessened by that. Like there's definitely something to an offensive line gelling, but with the Ravens system, to me at least, it's 100% offensive lineman friendly. The only thing that it stresses the offensive lineman on is when Lamar's scrambling around and you don't know where exactly you should just block somebody. But as far as like the assignments, you don't have to dominate your man for a successful play. It's just positional, get in their way, turn your hips, wall off your guy. And I don't have any doubts that Villanueva is going to have the brain for that. But Cole, is there any final thoughts before we wrap up here real quick?
It's just one of those things where I think when you look at the O-line potential from left to right, there's such strong potential. And, it might be one of those you're wearing purple tinted glasses thing. Of course, I'm going to say the Ravens offensive line is going to be good, but I really think this group has a potential to be better than the 2019 group pre-Skura injury, just based on, the evidence that we have in front of us. And I know people are like, well, we, downgraded at right tackle. Stanley's banged up. I get it. There's reasons to be worried, but I think that they can be very, very diverse with their play calling. I think that these guys can really step in, work off one another, and I think this O line is going to be quite good in 2021 if everyone's healthy, and that's the key part for me.
Well, Cole, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you, part of my football family, and I'll have all your information down there. Please, guys, follow Cole. Follow Two Guys Watching Football on YouTube. So thank you, Cole.
Thanks so much, Jason. Take care, buddy.
All right, you too.